Yeah, sorry people, I have a very bad cold, so I'll do my best to not start coughing too often. I'm basically going to give you guys an update on the social casino space, free-to-play casino games. It's one of the sub-sectors of the gaming industry or the games industry. A lot of articles have been published about it. We're not always the most popular boys in the industry, but in the next 50 minutes I'll basically give you guys an update on what's happening right now and any other trends. A little bit about us. Plumby, company I'm a CEO and co-founder of. We were created 3.5 years ago. 3 ex-EA Playfish people. We're 65 people today, all based in London. I would say we are in the top 10, both in revenue and in audience. We raised in total close to 17 million. Last round was led by a TV production company, Endemol, and we have 2 games live. A slots game, which is still our flagship game, and a bingo game, which we launched end of last year. So social casino, and when I say social casino, I'm talking about free-to-play games. I'm not talking about real money, regulated gambling. I'm talking about the free-to-play games. It's a fast-growing industry, and it's becoming mature quite fast. In 2014, the estimate, which I think is believable, was that social casino games had a revenue of around $2.7 billion. I think the expectation for 2015 is that it's going to be between $3 and $3.5 billion. So it is a meaningful chunk of the games industry. It's not trivial. When I say mature, I think it's the next point is actually an example of that. Right now, about 50% of the revenues are owned by the top 5 players. The top 5 players, we'll come to that later, are actually companies that traditionally have never been into video games. They're more traditional gambling or casino companies, Caesars, IGT, Aristocrat. Zynga is also still in there, and Big Fish as well. We still see ongoing consolidation, more and more M&A. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But we also see, and this is not unique to social casino, obviously, is that Facebook Canvas as a platform for games has definitely hit a plateau. It's definitely over its peak, and there's huge growth in mobile and tablets instead. An interesting point is that because of the audience that plays social casino games tends to skew older. For Plumby, our average player is 52 years old, and we're not really an exception in the industry. Is that there was probably a bit more inertia compared to other industries targeting a younger audience of moving away from Facebook. I know, for example, for strategy games and games targeting a younger audience, a younger demographic, Facebook Canvas has been over, so to speak, for quite a few years. So casino kind of held, the casino audience stayed longer on Facebook Canvas. And actually, a bit of as a result of that, what we hear right now is that more than 50% of all the games revenue on Facebook Canvas comes from casino games. What we also see, and again, this is not just unique to the casino category, is that production and marketing budgets are going up. Today, I would probably say the absolute minimum production budget for an ambitious casino game where you actually wants to generate meaningful revenues has to be at least $2 million, and we see marketing budgets of $10 million and more. So it's definitely no longer indie territory. It's quite hostile, I think, for newcomers, unless you're very well funded or you are a company already in this space. There's basically 3 main categories in social casino: slots, bingo, and poker. There is a category called casino, which is basically also all the traditional table games, your blackjack, your roulette, and so on. But when we see companies that basically have other casino games, for example, Double Down Casino, which is the number 2 in the industry, would be a good example. We still see that the majority of the revenue comes from slots, actually. In the case of Double Down, it's rumored that more than 70% of their revenue actually comes from slots. So I think it's almost fair to say that you can actually club together casino and slots. And that would basically mean that if you basically look at them as one category, that they would represent almost 3/4 of the total revenue of the industry and 55% of the audience. Bingo would be around 15% of the market, and poker would be the remaining part. Obviously, demographics are a little bit different, as you can imagine, between the different ones. Bingo and slots tend to skew more female, a bit older, while poker tend to skew a little bit more male and younger. Mentioned this earlier. The top 5 in the market currently has 53% market share and growing. Yeah, that basically means that it's becoming harder, I think, as a smaller player to get a meaningful chunk of the pie. I think this was the top 10 in May 2014. Also, if you look at the names, the companies that actually are dominating the space, the biggest player right now is Caesars. Caesars did a bunch of acquisitions that they bought 4 or 5 social casino studios in the last couple of years. Most famous one being Playtika from Slotomania. Also bought House of Fun. They also bought an EA studio in Montreal that was making the WSOP poker game. Number 2 is IGT. IGT has been in the slots manufacturing business, the traditional land-based slots machines for decades. Bought Double Down in a very spectacular deal a couple of years ago for $500 million. At the time, everybody thought that IGT's board was going crazy, but I think if you look at the current revenue and profit trends, I think it was a very, very sensible deal. Zynga is still around with their poker. Just had a couple of slots games that are doing quite well. If anything, I would say the only thing at Zynga that is sort of like kind of working right now would probably be their casino industry. I think everything else is probably a little bit more challenging. GSN, another big player, has been around in casual games for a while. Did a big acquisition, bought Bash Gaming from Bingo Bash. And Big Fish obviously got acquired for close to $900 million in later end of last year. Is also a very big player with their Big Fish casino. Again, this is not new for most of you here. It's all about mobile. Mobile took over web in the mid-13, as I mentioned earlier. Probably casino, it was a little bit slower than in other categories, but it's definitely happening. Desktop is still 50%. Facebook Canvas is still 50% of current revenues, but it's going down quite quickly. M&A. So there's been a lot of deals in this space, over $2 billion worth in the last 4 years, including some really big ones mentioned. Double Down, $500 million. Big Fish, close to 900 million. And one interesting thing here is actually that a lot of the M&A actually happened from fairly old-fashioned companies, actually land-based, traditional companies that have been around for 20, 30, 50, 60, 100 years. Well, we don't see a lot of deals coming from sort of like the newcomers, the online gambling companies, which at first glance looks a bit strange because you would think that there's more of a cultural fit or technology fit between an online gambling company and a social casino studio. But when we think about how online gambling actually operates, in the large majority of online gambling companies, products are outsourced. They actually use third-party products. Not a lot of online gambling companies own their own technology or products. They basically use the same slots as their competitors, or blackjack, or roulette, or poker software. While the land-based casinos have been much more focused on thinking from, I would almost say, a product point of view. How can we create a unique experience in the Bellagio or in the Wynn, in our resort, that is not exactly the same as something else? How do we actually think about creating an experience for players, which I think from a mindset point of view is much more closer to what you will find in a social casino company than the idea of like, let's outsource technology and products and so on. So that's just my personal theory. I think it does play a role, and obviously also it doesn't help. It helps from an M&A point of view is that the land-based casino industry has been largely flat. There's not been a huge amount of growth. And obviously, these companies need to find new areas of growth. So it's quite spectacular, $2 billion in the last couple of years. There's basically 2 main corporate strategies that have been driving that. First one is almost a bit redundant now, I would say. That was definitely maybe the first wave, where gambling companies look at social casino almost as a marketing tool, as a way to build a brand, as a way to build an audience. Just a couple of examples. PokerStars launching a free-to-play game. Cheeky Bingo also has a free-to-play game. So the idea is much more to extend the brand, maybe build an audience or enter in markets where real money gambling is not allowed or not yet allowed. Well, the deal would be to link your casino game with your CRM systems, your loyalty system. MGM is doing that really clever with the guys from Play Studios with their My Vegas game, where you can actually play a free game. And by playing, you actually collect points in your MGM credit card, your MGM loyalty card, that you then can go, and if you are in the Bellagio, you can get a free bottle of wine with your dinner and so on. So there's a clever link between the two, but probably the most important driver is social casino as a growth driver, a growth engine, a revenue driver. We've seen that a lot of the social casino companies have been growing fast in top line, but also have been very profitable, which again is not a given in the mobile game space. So they're not really part of the gambling world at all. They basically are run as separate entities within these organizations and are basically the growth drivers. We see that right now at IGT, which again is a company that is it's a huge company, thousands and thousands of staff, but we see that the social casino arm is basically what is driving what has been driving the growth for the last couple of years. I think there's one other slide. Like it is quite different comparing social with real money casino. The products are quite different, even though they look very similar sometimes, but also the expectation in the audience is quite different. What people want to get out of a social free-to-play casino game versus out of a real money. If you are a gambler, you might be familiar with this gambling thrill, the idea that you are so close to winning, or that you don't really get that in a social product because there is no cash out. You cannot win anything. You cannot win a prize even. So it's really more about me time, a bit of entertainment, a bit of guilty pleasure maybe. Social players optimize their time, their gameplay for time. They want to play longer rather than that they want to win something out of it. So this is quite a different way of playing slots or bingo or poker compared to real money. And also the key driver for spending in those kind of games is, again, I want to buy more time rather than I want to win more coins. That's not really the main driver. So people have also said that once real money gambling is allowed in the US, which God knows might happen in the next 5 years, maybe, we'll see. Then maybe the social casino games will die because then all the players, there's almost a substitute because people don't have access to real money on online casino. But there's not a lot of evidence there. A lot of players in the UK, Italy, Sweden, where online gambling is totally available for everyone. There's a huge number of online gambling websites, also mobile real money gambling websites, and we don't really see a drop of players there. The same actually in the 2 states in the US where online gambling is allowed, New Jersey and Nevada. No one has seen any significant drop in social casino players. So I personally don't think that there is any cannibalization effect, and if there will be anything, it will be very low single digits percentages. And this is an interesting one. Obviously, it's a little bit apples to pears, but it is interesting that in the US, currently in terms of revenue, we see that social casino is a much, much larger part than online gambling. Obviously, it's also because there's only a handful of states that have legalized it, so I appreciate it's not 100% fair. But still, I think it is telling that social casino is really a meaningful driver of growth and revenue in its own right, and doesn't need real money gambling to have any relevance as a business. So that's it. I think I stayed nicely within my time. Happy to answer any questions. That's my Twitter and that's our website. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I personally think it's fascinating that when we started out the social casino thing, there was this kind of expectation that it was all going to be about, particularly the US, legalizing gambling. And I think you've said this for a long time, and I think I've always agreed with you, is that this idea that it's actually a different enjoyment. And I think a really fascinating thing for me is it seems to me, and tell me if you think I'm right, it seems that the casinos are actually lending their brand authenticity to the social games rather than the other way around. Is that fair?
I think that's true. Not their brands, but also I think about how players like to play. Because I think that the way how players play social casino is quite similar to how you play in Vegas. You wander around a bit, you have a drink, you're going to try to find a nice show to watch, you gamble a bit. Like, it's much more casual. It's all about the experience rather than the machines
I think it's a
themselves.
social kind of ease, a safety, if you like, of playing a game that doesn't have a payout. Because I can pay, and I don't have the anxiety over whether I'm going to get my money back or not. And there's a certain safety in that kind of model, I would argue.
I think that's true as well. Yeah, absolutely.
So one opportunity for a question, if anyone's got one before we have a coffee break. Anyone got a quick question? On that note, I think I'll take it as a thank you to Raf. Thank you very much.